Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
Okay, welcome to Punching Up, the movie podcast, the niche movie podcast that you haven't heard of yet. My name's Damian, and this is my co-host,
Adam.
This week, hello to the Holy Mountain. Jodorowski awaits us. After last episode's traumatic experience of Moulin Rouge, this week I get to slip back into my usual role of the good guy, and Adam puts back on his ever so comfortable and made-to-measure costume of Dick Dastardly, as we will be discussing Alejandro Jodorowski's trippy, in Shaman the Membrane classic film, The Holy Mountain. But before we get into a bit of Jodorowski background, Adam, would you kindly attempt to synopsize the film?
I think attempt is the right word, because plot isn't kind of any kind of word I would use to describe the narrative of the Holy Mountain. Let me give it a go. It focuses on a character that's simply known as the thief, who we meet kind of basically in a loincloth, semi-crucified, being pelted by children. I think he might be covered with flies. And then he just goes on this sort of kind of odyssey through this nameless Central American city where there's all sorts of weird, decadent, horrible, sacrilegious stuff happening that he just seems to kind of bear witness to. And then he climbs this massive sort of monolith-shaped structure, inside of which space works differently. It's a very narrow structure, but inside there's this like huge vast expanse sort of temple thing where he meets the alchemist, played by Jodorowski himself, who then, I think he tries to rob him, and he's but then he's sort of paralyzed with some kind of mystical martial arts sort of stuff, and then is taken on this spiritual odyssey where he meets these 7, is it, or 9? I can't remember.
7.
Industrialists, all relating to a planet in the solar system and possibly a tarot card. I can't remember. I only saw it a few days ago. And each one of these is an evil industrialist, who's sort of mechanizing some kind of slaughter or degradation of the working classes. And then all of them go on a journey to find the Holy Mountain in a sort of kind of voyage of enlightenment, which involves lots and lots of spiritual exercises. And they're supposed to supplant 9 masters who live on the top of the Holy Mountain and learn the subject of immortality. And then it sort of ends in a very sort of meta-y, breaking the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th walls as Jodorowski addresses the audience and delivers some absolutely incomprehensible lessons about the nature of reality. And in the midst of all of this, there's lots and lots of exploding animals, amputees, male and female nudity, throw in a little bit of child nudity as well, loads and loads of blood, kind of freaky production design, outlandish costumes, and that's the plot as best as I can summarize it.
That was brilliant, mate. Well done. And you did only see
you.
it 2 days ago, so well done. That's not an easy task.
And doesn't really do the film justice at all.
No, exactly.
What you're actually watching, and what the succession of things you're kind of confronted with or immersed with.
We'll get into it in a bit, but it's almost like more of an experience, isn't it, than a sort of like narrative, easy to sort of follow plot situation. But let me give you a little bit of background on the maestro. So Alejandro Jodorowski was born in Tocopilla, Chile in 1929. His father was a merchant, and according to Wikipedia, his father was quite abusive to his mother. The family then moved to Santiago when Alejandro was 9, where the young artist discovered poetry, with his first poem being published when he was 16. He went to college for 2 years before dropping out, joining a circus, and going on to start a career as a theatre director, heading his company Teatro Mimico. Eventually he became bored with Chile, and he moved to Paris in 1952 in his early 20s, where he studied mime with Etienne Decroux alongside the most famous Western mime, Marcel Marceau. In 1960, he moved to Mexico, and with his interest in surrealism growing, he founded the Panic Movement with Fernando Arrabal and Roland Topor, an art collective that created experimental, surreal, absurdist, and chaotic performance art shows. In 1968, he released his first feature film, Fanny y Lis, which, when it was premiered at the 1968 Acapulco Festival, instigated a riot due to its film's graphic content, which at the time was avant-garde and shocking. And then in 1970, he releases his breakout film, Adam's favourite, the acid western El Topo, which became a massive cult hit when it was noticed by John Lennon and George Harrison of the Beatles, who lauded it, and consequently their manager Alan Klein gave Alejandro $1 million to produce his next film where he had total free reign. The Holy Mountain. What I will say about the making of the film is that central members of the cast spent 3 months with Jodorowsky doing various spiritual exercises, including studying Zen Buddhism, Sufism, yoga training, learning various aspects of the I Ching, the Book of Changes, the famous Chinese divination text, reading and studying the Kabbalah, the text of Jewish mysticism, and the teaching of George Gurdjieff, the Greek Armenian philosopher whose work teaches that people can live in a state of hypnotic waking sleep and can strive to reach higher states of consciousness through spiritual practices such as yoga, Sufism, and working on oneself. The film is an allegorical spiritual tale. It's littered with symbolism by the philosopher Carl Jung, South American shamanism, religious texts, the tarot, and is as confounding as it is ambitious. As a little post note, after completing The Holy Mountain, the producer Alan Klein wanted Jodorowsky to adapt the story of O, which was based on the classic tale of female masochism. But Yodo, who had apparently discovered feminism during the filming of The Holy Mountain, refused to make the film, instead leaving the country to escape any obligations, and as revenge, Klein, who owned El Topo and The Holy Mountain, made them both unavailable to the public for 30 years. To date, Jodorowsky has made 9 feature films, but has created a series of comics, including The Incal, an epic space opera with famed French artist Jean Giraud, aka Mobius, and a form of therapy called psychomagic, which is a combination of psychotherapy and shamanic teachings. He's a director who used to be an artistic disruptor, but I think has mellowed in his later years. And after that, I'm now going to pass it on to Adam, because he chose the film to let us know his thoughts about The Holy Mountain. So over to you, my friend.
And I think also just add that you just left out all the controversies bubbled up.
We'd get to that.
We get to that. Yeah. But yeah, so there is a dark side, or there was a dark side to Jodorowsky and his working practices, which we will cover. All right. When I originally drafted my list of films to Damian to to sort of, that would be the sort of founding episodes of this podcast, The Holy Mountain was pretty much but I've just been unwilling to pull the trigger on it for quite a while, in the same way that Damian was unwilling to pull the trigger on Moulin Rouge. But Damian, having endured Moulin Rouge, he kind of basically cashed that chip in, kind of made me watch The Holy Mountain again. So my history with The Holy Mountain is I love Westerns. Anybody who's watched this podcast will probably have figured that out. But so I was very aware, I think probably from my early 20s, that there was this film out there, this acid Western that was like known as the first midnight movie, called El Topo, and then I got a chance to watch it. I can't remember how long ago, at the Broadway cinema in Nottingham, and I was really looking forward to it, and I had a very rough time with it. I came out hating it. I just felt it was just a pretentious, very unpleasant to look at, sort of left me feeling very queasy, and ultimately the ultimate sin, really, really boring. And I sort of had a real axe to grind with Jodorowsky ever since. However, I'd seen images of The Holy Mountain, and I will say this for Jodorowsky, I'm going to say a lot of bad things about him. If you look at a still of any of his movies, they look extraordinary. He knows how to frame a shot. His color scheme is kind of unique. If you're watching this on video, you'll see that with the sort of the image of the temple behind us, and his the machines, the physical props and machines and sort of mechanisms and things that he makes for his films. It's all sort of in camera, look extraordinary. And I think his costumes are amazing. As these outlandish costumes, and he designed all of them. He's a proper auteur in that sense. And so I'd seen, sort of images of the Holy Mountain on the Jodorowsky box set, and I thought, well, I need to see this. I'm curious about this. And then during lockdown, a friend of mine, I've sort of mentioned this before, I think on the Jean-Luc Godard episode when we did Band Apart. I had a friend over lockdown, and we would just sort of exchange recommendations with each other and make each other watch aspects of cinema that we hadn't normally explored. And one of the big sort of good takeaways from that was I just did this binge watch of Antonioni movies, who bears, I think, comparison with Jodorowsky on some level. And I thought they were brilliant. I thought, oh, it's time to jump back into Jodorowsky again. And I watched The Holy Mountain and absolutely hated it. I couldn't stand it. It was an awful film, I thought. It just looked extraordinary. But what did I hate about it? Well, there were a lot of things. I basically, and I watched it again, and I'm just gonna put my cards on. I'm gonna put my cards on the table, normal cards, not tarot cards. I put my cards on the table, and basically watched it again a few days ago, and and I just probably maybe hated it even a little more. I mean, I think when we do these podcasts, I think there's normally when we rewatch a film, it's like there's a takeaway. I can think, well, that wasn't like 2001. I think I've like sort of I think I've sort of dialed back or stepped back or calibrated my view over most films we've seen and found something that I kind of enjoyed in this. But I never want to see this film again. It was, I thought if you, I found it grotesque in a way that was actually alienating. I found it very unpleasant to look at. His color scheme, his love of sort of blood and gloop and sort of just sort of images. I found it very distasteful. I know he's trying to shock, but I think I found there's a lot of child nudity in it that I just kind of I was a little bit uncomfortable watching. I think what I found my main things about it, I thought it was incomprehensibly pretentious. I thought it was very boring for something so visually lush. Both films come in just a little bit over, a little bit under 2 hours, but I felt like I'd been I'd done one of his exercises with him, and I'd been in with him in some kind of psycho magical seminar, like sort of for about a week, and I felt I was being sort of preached at, but I didn't quite know what he was preaching, because I felt like all of his films with this mass of contradictory messages. Wasn't quite sure what he was trying to say. I felt there was a colossal ego at the heart of it, that all his films are really about him and how marvelous a shaman he is, and that you're constantly effectively being taught these lessons that are actually really boring. But if you find them boring, that's your problem, because really mysticism is for those people that have ears to see. That's probably Jodorowsky. Eyes to see and ears to hear. I felt and sort of I found it a very rough, boring, incredibly pretentious experience. And this guy has got his fanatical acolytes who absolutely love his work, and he's kind of like he's where cinema should be going. But I just thought, this is basically like a shamanic version, or albeit a very avant-garde and kind of beautifully composed shamanic version of basically a faith film that is basically hitting you over the head like God's Not Dead. And I'm obviously I'm religious, I'm a Christian, but I don't like faith films particularly. And I felt that this was like the most beautiful looking, that also happens to be hideously ugly. It makes you feel sick looking at it. Just for the way he just, I don't know, he's a great single image composer, which is interesting that he's had a great success in comics. But in terms of the way he constructs his images, in terms of the way the mise en scène and the way they flow together, there's just something that isn't fluid, that is very static, that's constantly holding you at distance. There's no real characters. Everyone's a cipher, and I don't really like that. And if you compare him to the person that he is compared with constantly, is David Lynch. It's a completely different story. David Lynch has characters that exist in these surreal worlds, and narratives and stories, and you're drawn into his worlds that are often outrageously sort of terrifying, never less than beautiful at the same time, but they're compelling and they're hypnotic. And this had the absolute opposite effect on me. And yeah, I think it might remain my least favorite film, yeah, of maybe anything I've seen that has the auteur stamp on it. And
Mm.
including, say, Band Apart, which at least has that brilliant dance sequence to commend it. This doesn't have anything like that, and I
Mm. Mm.
absolutely probably hated it even more than you hated Moulin Rouge. There we go.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Well,
this
well
is
done,
yeah,
mate. This is
it's
again, this is
angry.
therapy. This becomes therapy again, as it
No,
always does. We just get it off our chest. That's the therapy.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
therapy, like get
Yeah,
the
yeah,
anger out,
yeah,
release
yeah, yeah,
it, vent.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw the Holy Mountain years ago, and I don't really have much of a recollection of it. Maybe recollection of images, but I don't really remember. I don't think I hated it. I don't think I loved it, but I don't think it sort of didn't stay with me in the way that it was, I suppose, supposed to. I don't think I'd seen El Topo until I watched it this time round. So I didn't have much of much knowledge of Jodorowsky. I didn't mind the Holy Mountain. I didn't love it, but I didn't mind it. I enjoyed going on a little bit of a weird, arty journey that looked beautiful and that had suggestion of symbolism and shamanism. And maybe he didn't know exactly what he was saying. But, he came off the back of that theatre company, the Panic Movement that I was saying. I think he directed like 100 plays. So this is a guy who, in the what I want to say, like the late 50s or the early 60s or to the mid 60s, had just directed a lot of experimental art house theatre that is either you're into it or you're not. It's really like Licorice or something, isn't it? Or Marmite, like some
Or
people either
Glass.
hate it,
Yeah,
yeah,
eating.
eating glass. Well, that's what some people feel like eating Marmite is, or licorice even. I don't mind it. I have more of a tolerance towards it. It's not necessarily my favorite, uh, but I think that there's a place for it. And yeah, I don't mind that it's out there. So this time round, watching the Holy Mountain, it was okay. It was all right. It wasn't. Again, I sort of felt a little bit ambivalent towards it, to be honest with you. But what it did do was send me down a massive rabbit hole, and I ended up watching loads of Jodorowsky's work, his later films, and watched a bunch of them. But before we get into that, El Topo, you already said you didn't like El
Yeah,
Topo.
yeah.
You
I,
felt
I
you hated
rewatched
it.
El Topo and I couldn't stand it. Because the thing was, I couldn't remember why I disliked it, and,
Hmm.
and and it was just a nice refresher course on everything that I really didn't like about it. And it's pretty much the same list of complaints about you can apply to Holy Mountain, but you just sort of maximize that for the Holy Mountain. I have to say, I think. He can shoot an action sequence. I'd a little bit more kind of grudging kind of acknowledgement of his sort of technical skills as a filmmaker, because the first half of El Topo is a gunfighter played by
Hmm.
Jodorowsky who wanders around with his own son, his naked son, on his back, then kind of abandons his son and shacks up with this mysterious lady, and then goes off to fight sort of four mystical gunfighter masters who are kind of like the kind of magic master gunfighters, and sort of learns lessons of enlightenment along the way, and then winds up trapped in a cave with a load of amputees, and I have to say becomes a really useless rubbish monk, and sort of goes out into this decadent town. So it's almost like, and I don't even know what he's trying to do. He's just trying to raise some money to get these amputees. This has made me laugh. He did make me laugh, and I'm not sure. There's just a line where he just wakes up in a cave, like, and all of a sudden he's a monk. 20 years later, I didn't know it was 20 years until I read something, and sort of shaved and he's got this like kind of amputee like lover muse, and she goes, "We're all amputees because of incest." It's just this line, just dead matter of factly delivered. I think that's another thing. I don't think he's got a sense of humor. I think he thinks he's funny, but he's not.
Mm.
And you see a bit of his Marceau training as he goes into the town and basically just does these really. If it was a street entertainer on Nottingham, I would just give him the widest of berths because he's doing these like little soft shoe shuffles and like clown hands and clown faces and trying to get some money while all this horrific stuff's going on around him that he just seems kind of indifferent to. And he's just a bad monk and he just gets people killed, and I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to think about all of that. And
Yeah.
I thought it was horrible. It's actually longer than the Holy Mountain, but feels slightly shorter, but still feels really long. And I think because it's a Western as well, and it's got a member. It's actually got there's a Peckinpah connection because it's got Alfonso Aurora as one of the first of the very kind of scuzzy looking like henchman gunfighters that he
Yep.
encounters. Who's
Okay.
in the Wild Bunch, he's like General Mapache's kind of toady like right hand man in the Wild Bunch. So I hated El Topo, and I watched The Holy Mountain. I did watch Jodorowsky's Dune. That was I think
Same.
I get an extra credit for that, which I really enjoyed. And I have to
Same.
say, softened my attitude to Jodorowsky, the man, because when you read about him at the height of his powers, he's not particularly likable guy. Like the stuff that I mean, there's obviously we can get into it. There's all sorts of kind of post hashtag Me Too stuff that's been kind of leveled against him, stuff that he said that he did on set, and also the fact that for a very very enlightened man, he does play into the the negative stereotype of the kind of Maharishi who likes to use spiritual enlightenment just to get girls,
Mm.
because there's an awful lot of nude women draped around him in his you do there's a bit of male nudity, but I think if you kind of just leveled it up, there's an awful lot of just attractive women draped around these shamans and and all the magical ceremonies
Yeah.
do involve like women getting the kits off and things like that. So
Mm.
there was I didn't like him. I didn't. I think down the line I might have the stomach to watch his later movies, his more reflective movies about his childhood, The Dance of
Yeah,
Reality
I really
and the
loved
other
them.
one.
I thought they were
Oh,
really,
good,
really
yeah, good,
both of
yeah.
them, Dance of Reality and Endless Poetry. Yeah, I thought they were really beautiful. They
Yeah.
they feel like they're obviously not massively budgeted, and
Mm.
the reason why I watched the Dance of Reality was because of Michel Seydoux. It says at the end of Dune, doesn't it, that they made a film for the first time in what 23 years, and they never made a film together before. Like they were just trying to make Dune, yeah. And Michel Seydoux is the great uncle of Leia Seydoux. Did you know that?
Ah, yes, of course.
Mm. But yes, I really loved those two films. I thought they're weird, like that, but they're not as weird as this. And he's an old man now, and he does appear in the films as himself as an old man, commenting on his younger. It's usually like one of his sons. I think he had four sons. Christabel died, I think in 2020, but Aidan Jodorowsky, who does lots of his soundtracks, and Brontis Jodorowsky, who was going to play the
Paul
Paul
Muad'Dib in Dune.
Atreides. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which that's quite interesting. And he's the not the main character, but like he plays his dad in Dance of Reality. In both of them actually, and he's really good. Like the acting's really good. It's interesting, and I think there's more of a narrative through line, even though there's a few little shocky bits that seemingly, I don't know, unnecessary. But yes, I enjoyed both of those films. I watched Santa Sangre as well. You've seen that, haven't you?
Yeah, I did enjoy that. I forgot to mention that, because I watched Santa Sangre. I think mainly because it was, it's lockdown and what else are you going to do? But it was also because it was billed more as a horror movie. And I don't remember a lot about. I remember the central premise about is it
Hmm.
about a woman with no
Arms.
arms whose son kind of, is he a mime or something? No, he's a knife thrower
Yeah, yeah.
circus, and he
Again,
becomes her arms, and then they kind of go on some kind of like weird murder spree. And I
yeah.
remember really enjoying that. And I tell you why I think I enjoyed it, because I thought, why do I enjoy this and I hate the others? I think because he had a degree of constraint put on him, because he makes El Topo on his own terms. And he's done all
And
this
Holy
avant-garde,
Mountain. Hmm.
yeah, and the Holy Mountain completely on his own terms. and then he has a producer because it's Dario Argento's brother who produces it, and so
Yeah.
there's constraints put on him. It's like you can do what you want so long as you deliver on the horror, and it's very much like the Roger Corman model. You've got this amount of money, do what you want within the genre limitations, so long as it's got violence and boobs. I don't really care. And that was the you deliver these. Just give us like an act of violence or a car chase or a gunfight or and then a bit of nudity, and you can pretty much and stay on budget, and you can do that. So I don't know. I'm very sort of I'm very sort of skeptical of the myth of the artist who needs complete freedom and unlimited budgets, because you see it so many times. Well, I say so many times. You see examples of it when people get that, and they just come up with something that's incomprehensible, alienating, and I think Terry Gilliam's like the key example of that. The big myth about Terry Gilliam is like he's constantly kind of screwed over by producers, which isn't a myth. He was. But if you give him complete money, all he wants, let him make Don Quixote the way he wants to make it. Let him, and then when that happens, the films are often sort of incoherent, and because I think what he needs is a sympathetic producer. And I think the problem with Terry Gilliam probably doesn't like any producer, but a sympathetic producer that can kind of keep him on track a bit and apply some constraints that actually make his films a bit more narrative based. And I think that's what happens in Santa Segria. He has a sympathetic producer who he says, listen, deliver on the horror and do what you want. And that's why I enjoyed it, because I felt he didn't have complete freedom to indulge his, cinema. Cinema is a mechanism by which we can achieve like a higher levels of consciousness, and then completely forget to tell a story and completely forget to entertain people, which I think it sounds crass, but I think that is incredibly important. That you have to have. And we can talk about films, and we can talk about any David Lynch film that you could stack up against it. I mean, I think Eraserhead is a phenomenally alienating film, but it's compelling, and you want to exist in this world, however sort of ostensibly ugly and strange it is. And David Lynch never forgets, except you can maybe argue Inland Empire, which I didn't get more than like half an hour through, but you can argue that he never forgets to tell a story and present you with actual human beings to care about or to be afraid of. And that's your kind of rabbit hole, isn't it, to go into, or that's your and yeah, so I did enjoy that. I didn't watch it again. I was just Jodorowski'd out. I didn't watch anything, and I felt like I did well to watch Jodorowsky's Dune. Although
that's easy. That's a
well, it wasn't actually
easy
because
watch,
because I my subtitles weren't working for some reason on my
nice.
rental. So I just they worked, but they were just it was almost like a sort of Jodorowsky point. Language is meaningless. So my subtitles would come like 2 minutes after they were spoken, so it was very confusing for a while. So I just switched them off. And half the film's in Spanish. No, I would say like a third of the film's in English, and the rest of the interviews are conducted in Spanish and French, aren't they? But I kind of got the gist. I'd seen it before. Yeah.
I'd never seen Santa Sangre before, and watching
what
it
did
this
you
time.
think?
Well, I didn't overly enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed the sort of clowning aspect of it, and then the last 20 minutes I felt like an Argento film, and I'm not like the biggest Argento fan. Like, I think that I don't often enjoy his films, and I didn't know that it was written by his brother. And I was thinking, this is like an Argento film, like one of those sort of opera or those sort of shocker films that somehow for some reason don't really satisfy me. It was okay. It had some moments in it, I think, like basically like The Holy Mountain and El Topo. There are moments in it that I enjoy, but as a whole, is not overly bothered. I did watch The Rainbow Thief, which was on YouTube for free. And I thought, and that was again like Santa Sangre. So Santa Sangre was done in '89, and The Rainbow Thief was 1990. So 1990 was when we both went to Guildford. 1990 was when this film came out, and had featured one of our drama teachers from the school, Ian Ricketts, which you told me about before. I got your writing on Jodorowsky from a previous email. I'll just say these few things that you'd written. I really hate this filmmaker most of the time. I watched El Topo many years ago when it was re-released. It was long, boring, very rapey, and wildly pretentious. And then you said, Yeah, and then you said final thoughts on the J-Man. I think he's astonishing production and costume designer. I'm not damning him with faint praise when I say this. His visuals are unique and brilliant. There's nothing in cinema that looks like a Jodorowsky movie, which is also very true, right? Taken in isolation or as individual stills, which you've pretty much said. Many of his sequences are brilliant, but sitting through an entire movie is an ordeal. Enough about Jodorowsky. I realize I've written almost more about a filmmaker I don't like than I have about Lee Van Cleef. Jodorowsky wins. That was quite funny. It's true, isn't it? Sometimes it's
I'd love
easy
to
to
see Lee
talk
Van Cleef
about.
in a Jodorowsky film. He'd just punch him
Yeah.
out. He'd just punch him out. And Jodorowsky would film it and like stick it in the meat. And then
I mean,
destroy Lee Van Cleef by making him take LSD and take him on all these like sort of spiritual exercises and
yeah, that'd be. I would like to see that. I'd like to see an acid western starring Lee Van Cleef. The Rainbow Thief. I think it suffered from the same. I hear what you're saying. I think artists need, in general, artists need parameters, because although it can work sometimes, and especially when you're young and you're making your first film or your first book or your first piece of art, like that freedom is kind of necessary. But I think as you go on and then start to get involved in the business model of art, one needs a producer or one needs some kind of parameters to kind of go, okay, just stay within these walls and you'll do something interesting. But I found the Santa Sangre and the Rainbow Thief, yeah, just kind of unsatisfying. Like I don't really know what they're trying to say. So interestingly enough, Santa Sangre was written by Berta Dominguez D, who was the producer, Alexander Salkin's wife. And Alexander Salkin was producing the Rainbow Thief, and similarly said you can't go off script. You've got to follow exactly what's going on. And I think that he's just a director for hire. It's a really strange film with, again, some kind of interesting images. Omar Sharif's really good in it. He plays a kind of thief, fool type character again, so I think he's fitted in a few of the tarot archetypes. Um, Peter O'Toole is just okay. Christopher Lee has a bit of fun at the start, and it's 90 minutes. It's easy to watch. But what is it saying? I don't really know what the fuck it's talking about. I don't know what it's trying to do, and I don't think that's Jodorowsky's fault. I think that's more the problem with the script. It's just, I don't.
But
Yeah, again, I just
to be
didn't.
fair, to Jodorowsky, he did disown it. He didn't like it.
He did,
As
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
and then he didn't make anything else, I don't think, until Dance of Reality.
23
Um,
years later.
yeah, thank goodness.
But interestingly enough, like I think like I said, I think those last two films, Dance of Reality in 2013 and Endless Poetry in 2016, were for me the more coherent, more interesting films. Like the woman who plays his mum, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, sings in opera the whole time. She doesn't speak. It's all and it works. It's different and it's interesting, and he uses his sons who all have mime backgrounds, and that's interesting to me. I think that's I like the whole circus mime. There's some mime in obviously Santa Sangre, and there's a whole circus sort of feel to it, isn't there?
Well, I don't
Circus
know. Oh
aspect.
yes, oh, it's on
It's
Sangre,
Santa
yeah.
Sangre, yeah, which I enjoy, and then moving on to Nightmare. What's it called? Nightmare Alley. What was that? Was it
What, the
called that?
Guillermo del Toro film,
Yeah,
Nightmare Alley?
Nightmare.
Are you talking about
Nightmare Alley.
Guillermo del? Yeah,
Yeah. It has linkage, because that again is very sort of, it's based in and around a circus, and I watched that in and around watching these films. Yeah, that's interesting to me. Did you ever watch
yeah.
Carnival, by the way? Sorry, I'm just
I've watched what? Sorry.
Carnival, the HBO Carnival
Oh yeah, yeah.
series.
I watched a few. I watched a few episodes of it. Yeah. I'm not sure. I completely. I liked it. I kind of admired it, but it didn't really. I didn't sort of stick with it. But I do.
Mm,
I do like fairground horror. I like. I
mm.
think Freak. I think Freaks. Todd Browning's
Yep,
Freak.
yep.
Brilliant. And I think. You seem to. I think there's more. I don't know. I've not read any. Yeah, I've not read anything about why why he's so obsessed with amputees, because it sort of it
Mm.
felt, I don't know if it was I don't know, I don't want to be unfair to him, because I think he probably has a genuine sort of sympathy, like, to the, these are the kind of ostensibly grotesque, and I'm going to present them before you. But I don't know if he completely pulls it off. I don't know if I don't know if that was his intention, but it feels a little bit exploitative sometimes in a way that Freaks doesn't. And Freaks has one of the most sort of shocking endings, considering it was made in 1936, of like genuine,
Mm.
sort of circus freaks, for want of a better word. It's in the title of the film, kind of exacting this horrific revenge, hunting this woman. Yeah, Todd Browning has absolute sympathy and love for sort of marginalized outsider circus people, especially sort of, amputee performers and things like that, and bearded ladies and stuff. Whereas I don't think that necessarily comes across in. It's like everything. It feels. I think his motives are kind of pure in his own head, but there's a lot of stuff in those two movies that comes across as a little bit sleazy and a little bit opportunistic and a little bit kind of exploitative. But I might be being unfair. If I can just sort of say something nice about Jodorowsky, I did
Please.
really enjoy my rewatch of Dune, and I thought I would find him very grating, very teachy preachy, in the wrong way, in that very kind of quiet, patronizing way sometimes that sort of guru figures have, of not really listening to you, and whatever you say, I'm gonna, I will help you, I will guide, and he doesn't come across like that. He comes across as very human. I think as an old man, he's very, very likable. I think I would have really found his company intolerable if I'd met him in his 30s. But I liked him, and I admired his attempts to get Dune off the ground. I think he was guilty of willful naivety in not having a plan B and taking this extraordinarily avant-garde approach to Dune, having gotten this incredible like list of collaborators on board, which, if people haven't seen the film, involves Salvador Dali, Orson Welles, and it's amazing story about how you cut deals with people, Mick Jagger, David Carradine, Mobius, H.R. Geiger, Dan O'Bannon. He gets a lot of these people to kind of uproot and live in Paris with him. I don't even know if he was paying them, and then to take all of that, Pink Floyd doing the music, after having insulted them for eating burgers in his presence. Great story. And then to sort of not have a plan B, just to take it to an American studio who aren't going to give him the money because it's just too out there, even for the 1970s, and then not have a backup plan, which Gilliam would have. Gilliam would have just, but he you kind of admire the effort. And then as an old man, I found his final, like, sort of the final thing he says to camera about, whatever your vision is, just do it, go out, do it. It doesn't matter if you can't afford it, just do it. His final sort of call to arms to go out and create whatever's in your head was really inspiring. And I liked him as a man, and I did like those little human things, because obviously he does present himself as a sort of, as much as a sort of spiritual leader as he does as a filmmaker, and the two are in synthesis in his own mind. I did love the bit where he got really, really sheepish and he talked about David Lynch making Dune, and he goes, great, he goes, because if anybody can do it, he can. And then going to see the movie and going, and it was awful, and I felt great. But yeah, nice one.
But he does admit that it was like, it's a human emotion that he had.
But
like,
that's why I liked it. That's when he's kind of his most likable, and towards the end, and although I have to say, here's a question for you: do you think Jodorowsky's Dune is better as an imagined film that never got made than it ever would have been?
You said that. I think that the effect of the energy that Jodorowsky put into trying to make Dune and bringing all those people together had a massive effect on Hollywood that wouldn't have probably been had he made the film. I don't think the effect would have been different. Yes, I don't know that the film would have been what he wanted to, but I think the imagination and the it's got to be saluted. You have to salute it, whether or not it comes off the ground, whether or not he's naive, whether or not like, he doesn't have a plan B. It's like I admire that. I admire the fact that he just went all in on this thing that was almost revolutionary and in keeping with his very sort of artistic punk sentiments that he had with his theatre company and that with his first two films. Going back to the amputees, that is all in the Dance of Reality and the Endless Poetry, and I wonder how much he may have seen that when he was younger, because there were people that must have, I think, in the Dance of Reality, that like lost limbs because they were working in mines, and they were, so maybe it was something that it was around him a little bit more. I think, yeah, there would be no Alien if, because that was the dream team, right? The Geiger, O'Bannon, and Mobius. They were all
But
part of.
also don't forget like that you've got Ridley Scott, who is like a proper studio filmmaker, and the producer was Walter Hill, and so Bannon and Hill locked horns, and Hill rewrote a lot of, so what you've got there is you've got like a tough but sympathetic producer who Dan
Yeah,
O'Bannon
yeah,
to his
yeah.
dying day would curse, because he ruined my
Mm,
movie. But all of the stuff that kind of is blue collar about Alien in the script, that roots it in this kind of mundane reality that this creature's going to come in and disrupt, is Walter Hill, as far as I'm aware. So
right.
you've still got the whole thing that all of these kind of disparate poets come under the hammer, if you like, of a tough, strong, incredibly strong director and a very tough,
Parameters.
yeah, parameters, but they're sympathetic.
Mm,
All of them are artists. Walter Hill's like, he's come off had he done the Warriors at that point? He's come off maybe like three or four brilliant, and I have to say, leaning into the avant-garde action movies, like the Hard Times, The Driver, which is very strange, and again, you've got characters that like just exist by what they are. You've got a character called the driver, the cop, and then the Warriors
mm,
is actually quite almost like a Fellini-esque action movie. And then he directs. So it's not like he's your kind of stereotypical cigar chewing, number crunching producer. He's a director. He knows, he's suffered probably under producers or had to navigate that whole thing, and then comes in and produces. And so I think those parameters, all of those, that kind of lightning in a bottle, which is like these great artists, but they're also governed by a sympathetic but tough producer that produces Alien. But yeah, but my question, I'll reword my question. Assuming that there was a producer that would give him as much freedom and as much money as he had for the Holy Mountain, not like, it's like whatever you want, you've got it. Go and make Dune. Make it exactly
mm.
the way you want. Money's not an object. Do you think it would be a good film, or do you think it would just be an absolute
It's hard to know.
mess
It's
of a
really hard
movie?
to know. It's hard to
Pretentious,
know.
boring.
I mean, obviously, some people would lay those accusations at it for sure.
Yeah, me.
I was exactly. I was thinking about Bertolucci's 1900, which is like 5 hours, 6 hours, 5.5 hours long. Um, and I'm glad that it's out there, and I enjoyed it when I saw it, and I've got it on my list to rewatch. I'll probably watch it in chunks, but I think that had he made Dune, it would have changed the landscape. I suppose it changed the landscape anyway, right? But it would have changed the landscape of films, because the idea of having a planet that has a consciousness, and the idea of really wanting to kind of elevate humanity through art, is something that's not obviously very easy to do. It's very, very difficult to do. But there's no Star Wars if Dune happens in the way that Dune was going to happen. There's no, a lot of these films wouldn't exist. And I think that, I don't know, it's almost like a alternate universe situation, that had it been made and had it been successful, it doesn't have to be 12 hours. Like he's talking 12 hours in the thing, or
It
20
would it would have been
hours.
12. Yeah, it would have been as long as he could have made it, I think. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I
having
don't
said that,
know. I don't
he did
know.
chop. No. That's not fair on Jodorowsky, because he did chop 20 minutes of chat out of the Holy Mountain because he wanted to reduce the talking. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's capable of editing his own work. My feeling being that this is the Jodorowsky that's just come off the Holy Mountain.
Holy
He's had
Mountain, yeah.
he's had his fingers burn when they try and make him shoot the story of O. So he's even more kind of doubling down on the way he
Mm,
talks about it. I'm assembling, calls all of his collaborators spiritual warriors. This is what we're doing, and things like that. I think it would have, from my point of view, my taste, my sensibilities, it would have been
mm,
awful. I think it would have been, it would have had some, like phenomenal production design, interesting monsters, but I think it wouldn't have had any of the, um, I don't think it would have had any narrative propulsion. I think the story would have been secondary to the message, and I think and the interesting thing about the planet consciousness bit is that he said that's not in the novel. This is my Dune.
it's
It
his
changes
own,
the
yeah.
novel, yeah, and I personally think it would have been an awful mess that would have looked brilliant in production stills. Really, really boring. Probably a really good
Mm,
soundtrack that I would probably have the album to, some really interesting Pink Floyd music, and,
hmm
and you know, and
And
that'd be
magma.
it. Yeah, and so I think in a way, in terms of like the legend, the myth of Jodorowsky, the best thing it could have happened to it is it not being made because it exists now in people's
Mm.
imaginations. He's got his famous Dune book that only like two copies exist of. I don't know why he doesn't publish it. Just that just
Yeah, has he not
just
published it? I was thinking that'd be the
no, just let
perfect
let the world see it. But then I think
mm,
that sort of like ties into his like
mystique.
existence as a series of puzzles within puzzles, and only the enlightened can really see it. And that's the same with my book. It's like just let the world see it. And yeah, and the storyboards looked interesting. Um, the art looked great. Let the world see it. But I think it would have. I think it exists better as a kind of an idea than as an actual movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, he hadn't shot a frame of film. So
No.
from shooting and everything that happens from shooting all the way through to editing, all the way through to the release and the battle with whatever studio decided. There's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of like unknowns that we can't really. You can't know what that journey would be like.
No. 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 Obviously.
And I think that so that's why I hesitate to say it's a mess. I hear what you're saying, and it
But
definitely gone.
but also let's look at an alternative universe where he didn't get that made, and then David Lynch was gonna make Dune and never made it, and that film would have been the great unmade film in people's minds, wouldn't it?
The David
So,
Lynch film.
yeah, what would
Yeah,
David?
yeah,
Let's say, imagine he just doesn't do that. He goes straight
yeah.
from The Elephant Man to Blue Velvet, and there's not Dune in the middle. And we just
Mm,
imagine what that film would have been. Oh, that would have been incredible. That would have been the greatest. And then what
mm,
what we get is what we get, which is like clearly like the least of his movies. Has its defenders. I like it. My dad loves it. And it's
mm.
had some, especially kind of this, in as much as there was a little bit of a backlash against Dennis Villeneuve's Dune, there have been a lot of retrospective. Oh, David Lynch's Dune's brilliant. It's messy, but there's kind of just real interesting stuff in there. But had it not
Mm.
existed, it would have existed in this sweet space where, oh, if only it had been made
Yeah,
to
yeah.
allowed to make Dune, it would have been a masterpiece. And what ends up is
Mm.
basically, the film that is like his most divisive film, kind of artistically, isn't it? And the one that most people kind of tend to punch down on, and whatnot.
This whole Holy Mountain thing like opened up a massive can of worms for me, or a massive like I watched the an interview between him and Daniel Pinchbeck. Daniel Pinchbeck is an author who wrote this book called Breaking Open the Head, which was about his experiences with what's it called, a psychedelic drug. It's not peyote. Um, I forget it on the top of my
Is it
head.
the same things that is it the same mushrooms that he got his cast to
No,
inject?
no, I don't think it's not a mushroom. It's a igbo. It's like an yeah, I can't remember. But it's yeah, his experience with a kind of like an ayahuascan type experience. The book's great, and I remember reading it years ago when it came out in the early 2000s, and I've just read like half of it. I managed to read half of it on through this time. It it talks about Burning Man as well, which I went to in 2012. Interestingly enough, he believed that 2012 was going to be a great catalyst, pitch back this is, for human consciousness being elevated, which a lot of people thought about at the time. I wasn't overly sure about that, but yeah, clearly I think what actually happened was the human consciousness went down as opposed to up. But his, as you were saying, how you felt you enjoyed Jodorowsky as a man. This is the same thing. He feels really human and really heartfelt and really curious and really artistic and really he listens to Pinchbeck and they have conversation and he never really feels like he's preaching about whatever his psycho magic is. And it's only like a 30-minute little interview, but I fully enjoyed that. But it also then made me think about the whole, obviously David Lynch has just passed recently and I'd never seen Eraserhead, so I watched that, which is very weird. I don't know that I really enjoyed it, but yeah, it's definitely, I suppose, more captivating and it feels like it has more parameters than the Holy Mountain or El Topo does, even though it is out there nuts. Did Fellini Satyricon, that was something that I'd never really wanted to see, but it came up in my research and I thought, okay, let me watch that. So I watched that. Have you seen that?
No.
That's really weird. And again, really beautiful and probably more enjoyable than the two, the Mountain and Topo, in the sense that it looks stunning. Like it's weird and sort of an adaptation of an old Roman, I can't remember which one it was, book. But I enjoyed that more than I enjoyed these other two. So thank you for bringing the Holy Mountain to this table, because
No,
for
no,
me,
no, no,
I've had a
no. I don't.
wonderful time. I've
I
had a
don't want to.
great time.
Well, can I just throw up just to show that I'm not completely immune to
Yeah.
this type of cinema, or just because I was thinking about films, and ironically they're both black and white movies. Actually, films I think tread a similar path but do a much
Mm.
much better job. And I think, did we mention this at the beginning or just in our pre-recording conversation? Dead Man, the Jim Jarmusch
Mm.
western. So that bears direct comparison with El Topo because it's a western. It leans into, it's kind of a quest western as well,
A question.
and a quest, and it has weaved into it, sort of William Blake poetry. The lead character played by Johnny Depp is called William Blake, after and not after the poet. He doesn't know anything about the poet, and so obviously William Blake was this kind of weird synthesis of sort of magic and Christianity, and he's considered a bit of a mystic, and so there's elements of that woven into Dead Man, and it has this kind of actually quite kind of, I don't know, this kind of strange ending, but it's brilliant, it's compelling, it works as a western, and it works as a piece of kind of acid cinema, or so I suppose mystical cinema, or whatever you want to call it.
That's interesting as well, though.
Yeah.
Jarmusch had made a bunch of films that were very successful before that, weren't they? So he kind of he knew what he was doing. It almost feels like with Topo and the Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky's just out there on his own, just being a bit of a crazy.
I think he knows what he's doing. I just don't like what he does, because he's clearly technically accomplished. It's not like you're watching, and also, as you mentioned, he'd had like hundreds and hundreds of
plays.
hours of which one of them was at Sacramental Drama. It was called. It was 4 hours. I would have hated his plays. I know that.
Yeah.
4
Totally.
hours where he kills some geese on stage and then has himself flogged. And I think, well, that start as you mean to go on. And so I think he'd sort of, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He did it in El Topo, he did it in Holy Mountain, and then the kind of wheels came off the wagon for about don't know, until his 80s. And the other one actually I was thinking of is Ben Wheatley's A Field in England, which probably leans even more into sort of El Topo and Holy Mountain territory, which, if people haven't seen it, is an English Civil War drama about a bunch of deserters trapped in a field that they can't get out of with a magus, like a magician, who's he's an evil man, so there's not kind of benevolent Jodorowsky type alchemist. And it ends with this, I think, is it 15 minute sort of rush of images as they're all kind of I don't know what's happening. They're all tripping on mushrooms, but they're all kind of entering into this sort of mystical state, and and it's kind of reminiscent of the Stargate sequence. But it's all in black and white, and it's relentless. But I think it's brilliant. I think A Field in England is,
Yeah,
an
I really enjoyed that.
yeah. So that and Dead Man, and I think so. You can see, like, with filmmakers that are more interested in, I mean, Jarmusch was never interested in conventional narrative. He's like made a point of that. Ben Wheatley's a 90-minute genre director who leans into the avant-garde and the experimental, and I think it has its apotheosis in A Field in England. And you can argue that his movies, with the exception obviously of the Meg 2,
This is a bad idea.
Just a little bit.
his movies after that are it's a bit of a downward spiral. They're all, I've had issues with all of his films, apart from like, I think he did a television drama that was kind of a bit more, Mike Lee-esque. I think it's called Happy New Year, Colin something or other, which I really like.
Yeah.
But everything else has always, it's not quite worked. So I think he has this incredible run of movies that leads up to A Field in England, and then he kind of, for me, creatively stumbles, even to the point where in his movie, was it In the Earth, he pretty much plays the hits and repeats the ending of A Field in England, but with kind of diminishing returns. But I mean, I think Jarmusch's Dead Man is one of the best films of the 1990s. I think it's his best film, and it's brilliant, and it is leaning in the direction of El Topo, but just does everything I kind of wanted El Topo to be is manifest there in Dead Man. So there we are. We haven't talked, and we haven't talked about how many animals he actually kills.
Yeah.
Very dodgy. But everyone's killing animals in 1970s movies. So, but he seems to kill more. But they're all frogs. No one cares about frogs. Although there is a New York Times review I read called "They Kill Animals and Call It Art," that basically spends a paragraph reviewing the film, and the rest of it is just this broadside against how many animals he kills and how many animals most American sort of action film directors kill. And then of course, because we did bring it up at the beginning, there's the fact that he sort of claimed that he sort of raped one of his actresses in the rape sequence in El Topo, which got a season of his movies cancelled, actually, in a Latin American Film Institute in the 1990s post hashtag. But I think he's kind of, and I think people believe him. I think that he said, I was saying that to shock, I was saying that to shock people and stuff, but I'm and and that doesn't seem to have like kind of brought him down in the way that you would imagine it would have done.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's. Yeah, go on.
I was just thinking. I read about what he'd said and his recanting of that, and how obviously when you're filming a film, it's it's not like just a one shot. There's loads of people on set, and like that kind of thing wouldn't have really happened. And that he was saying that it was very difficult for him to get his film distributed, and so saying something like that was shocking, and would have got more eyes on his film, I think. So I don't think that he did that personally. No, I think that he probably at that time he was a like I say, he was a sort of agitant or an artist.
Agent provocateur, wasn't it? Everything was about confronting and provoking.
Yeah. So, and at the time, it was a very different time, and it's not the coolest thing to do. I think the thing about with the naked children is that at that time, naked children, it wasn't the same, didn't feel the same way. It wasn't like
although one mother, there was a scene that he cut from.
That's right. Yeah,
because one mother. He wanted the mother's child to be naked,
as well, and she
withdrew the kid or like objected to it and tried to sue him for paedophilia. But I mean, I think it makes a difference that it's his own kid, and then I suppose you could look at, say, the trouble like Robert Mapplethorpe got into, the photographer who used to live with Patti Smith, for photographing his friends' naked children, and I think he seems to have been exonerated. So Not that we are in any way condoning.
No, but and also Melvin Van
no,
Peebles putting his
Yeah.
son in Sweet Sweetback and having him have sex with a woman naked. You know, like that is a purely sexual thing, and never really been. Nobody's really said, as far as I'm aware, said anything about it. And I'm sure the young, what's his name? What's Melvin Van Peebles' kid called? Mario Van Peebles.
Mario Van Peebles.
I don't think he was maybe complaining about it, but anyway, yes. I think
it's not how I would raise my kids.
No, of course, and I think most people not at all.
Yeah. Just I think you yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't know. That wasn't as hate fueled as I was hoping. I'm a bit disappointed.
That's okay.
Said
When
some
we
nice
listen
things.
back,
Said nice things about Jodorowski.
Yeah. Yodo.
No, I'm not gonna call him Yodo. Yeah, probably enjoy. Probably enjoy having a conversation with him. You know, glad he didn't make Dune. Never going to watch El Topo or the Holy Mountain. Might watch The Dance of Reality. I don't know if Jodorowsky's maybe won on points in this one. I hope not. But yeah, there we go. I'm done.
Nice one. Well done, mate. Well done.
Can I just say something? I've never wanted to quit doing the podcast more. I say more like I think about quitting doing the podcast. I don't think about quitting, but I was watching this thinking, I can't do this again. I can't. Maybe. I don't know if I want to do this podcast again if I've got to sit through films, which is the entire point of the podcast, isn't it? There we go. So you push me, you push me, or I push me.
It's good. We pushed each other, mate.
Push me to the point of like considering resigning and torpedoing the podcast.
I really wasn't.
Go do it with Charlie. You could just.
Yeah, no, I don't think he'd be interested in doing it. I felt that way going into watching Moulin Rouge, but then as I watched Romeo and Juliet and Strictly Ballroom, I had much more fun watching those two than I did. The hate. But anyway, okay, we're going to discuss what the next film will be later, so it's a mystery.
No idea.
Yeah,
I'm filmed. I don't want to watch films again. I'm just gonna,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to watch plays, listen to symphonies, read Russian literature, and just stay as far away from Chilean magical movie,
magical realism.
Magical mystery tours.
Yeah. All right, mate. And from
realism, there's nothing real about it. Go on, carry on, sir.
No, that's okay. I was just thinking magical realism. I didn't go into Gabriela Garcia Marquez, but we'll talk about that another time. And from sunny Australia, until the next time, we'll see what we've got in store for you.
I don't know it's dark outside. I don't know what the weather's going to be like, but is it even really the weather? Is this even actual reality? I don't know.
Yeah, just magic. It's pure magic.
Bye.
See ya.
The mission has been completed.